Hey everyone! Today I'm going to be discussing the movie Final Destination 2. My father introduced me to this series. I saw the third one in the theater and worried all the way home that I'd be in some freak accident where a tire came loose and flew through the windshield or something. Just a warning, this movie will probably be triggering for many. I've seen viral posts about it on Facebook, and I think the reason why is because the fear of you or someone you love dying in a car crash is such a relatable one, and many people, tragically, have experienced it. Anyway, to begin, this movie is a New Line Cinema picture, so the next time you see someone ask on social media what the first thing you think of is when you see the New Line Cinema logo, you can now say Final Destination 2. A television talk show is playing in the background during the opening credits. It's the 1-year anniversary of the Flight 180 crash out of JFK Airport. 40 students of Mount Abraham High School died, along with 4 faculty members. The host of the talk show and a guest discuss the bizarre accidents that soon followed involving the survivors who got off the plane right before takeoff. Now the main character, Kimberly, is saying goodbye to her father as she's getting into her vehicle with her friend. They're headed to Daytona. She has a really nice SUV. Why does she have such a nice pair of wheels? It doesn't sound like she has a job. I don't see her ever talk about one. Dad must have money to burn. She also has a cell back in 2003. I didn't get my first one until a few years later, and didn't get a smartphone until 2010 or 2011. Her friend torments Kimberly's dad by saying that they're bringing along condoms, whips, and chains. By the way, this was a good 7 years before Rihanna's song was released. The father is like, haha, buckle up. That will end up being the least of their concerns. The girls pick up 2 guys off screen, and now they're stopped in traffic. A woman in need of housing knocks on their car window, holding up a bag of cans. The bag breaks open, and the cans fall all over the road. The heartless kids laugh about it. They talk about what they'll do when they reach Daytona, and I have to say it sounds like a really fun trip, minus the weed, which probably smells disgusting. In an alternate universe, they probably had themselves a real good time. I'm really sad to think they missed out on that because of some stupid accident that probably was 100% preventable, because these accidents always are. What follows is an introduction to the various characters and a little bit of foreshadowing. They drive past a school bus for Mount Abraham High School. You can hear the passengers chanting something. It sounds like either pile up, which would be ominous if that's what they're saying, or else Iowa. On the car radio, there's a news report about a candlelight vigil for the 1-year anniversary of the Flight 180 crash at the high school. Kimberly changes the station. Now it's Highway to Hell playing. Some daredevil revs his engine as he drives alongside them. Kimberly gets a call from her dad who says her car is leaking transmission fluid. She should probably get it checked out. In case you're wondering, I don't think this ever comes up again. I suppose it's no longer relevant once the vehicle bursts into flames a little later on. A woman flashes them from the back of a motorcycle. Kimberly nearly cuts off a logging truck while trying to switch lanes. There's a cop behind her. Her friend throws his joint out the window and it lands on the windshield of some type A woman named Kat who's talking on her cell phone. There's a motorcycle speeding between cars and a truck driving by with the driver getting drunk behind the wheel. Kimberly looks out her window and sees a kid in the passenger seat of the vehicle next to her, crashing 2 toy trucks together. She makes a face. There's a guy who reminds me a little of Luke Perry, only with longish hair. He has that sort of laid-back, tough guy attitude. Black smoke is coming out of the back of his car. Fuzzy dice are hanging from his mirror. His name is Rory. A teen boy who kind of looks like Corey Feldman sits in the passenger seat of his mother's car. We'll later learn that the mother is named Nora and the son is named Tim. The cop is now behind the logging truck. He spills coffee on himself and it causes a distraction. The logs on the truck come loose and one goes through the cop's windshield, killing him instantly. This causes multiple crashes involving the motorcyclist Eugene, the guy with the dice named Rory, who survives the crash only to be T-boned by a huge truck, the woman Kat who flips when she hits a log in the road, and the son and the mother who crash into the log when a water bottle lodges under the brake. Their car explodes. Kimberly's vehicle flips, but she survives at first. A blonde guy we later learn is named Evan is also in a fiery wreck. Kimberly is trapped in her car, watching Evan burn alive as he screams, and then a vehicle comes toward her, about to smash into her. She snaps back to the present. It was just a daydream. But there's no relief, because right away the events and encounters she saw in the vision start to come true, starting with the woman with the cans. She tells her friends a crash is going to happen. She mentions something about Highway to Hell as she flips through the stations on the radio, and sure enough, AC/DC starts playing. She makes the decision she's going to block traffic behind her on the on-ramp. The cop with the coffee earlier comes up to her window, and she tells him about the pileup in her vision. He wants her to step out, probably thinking she's on drugs. The Evan guy is starting to get impatient. There's a pregnant woman named Isabella who is talking calmly to her unborn baby, but she's impatient as well. Both she and Evan get out of their vehicles and ask the cop if they can get going. He says, no. And then the logging truck from the vision goes by, and Kimberly points it out. The cop tells her to chill. Somehow, even without the cop being on the road and spilling the coffee all over himself, the accident still occurs. So apparently the logging truck is 100% at fault and not the cop being distracted. An out-of-control truck comes toward Kimberly. The cop grabs her and gets her out of the way just in time, but the truck smashes into her vehicle, and that's the last we'll be seeing of Kimberly's 3 friends. I find this whole scene really upsetting, to be honest. Car crashes, or the possibility of a car crash, is one of my biggest fears. I witnessed the aftermath of a crash involving metal poles going through someone's windshield in Florida on the highway back in 2000, and that's what turned me off of driving behind trucks carrying loose cargo. That was a huge lesson for me. My dad and I talked about that, how, it's best to stay clear of trucks such as that, so that you don't put yourself unnecessarily at risk. Also, I was once driving behind a truck with barrels in the back, and I thought to myself that it looked unsafe. And then no sooner did I think that than the barrels began flying off and onto the highway. So I've had some experience with this. The cop, his name is Thomas, and the other survivors are a bit rattled, but a cop in a tie at the station says to Thomas, "What's the problem? Those folks should be thanking their lucky stars. And did you hear that one of them won the lottery yesterday? Imagine that. Imagine winning hundreds of thousands of dollars one day, and then surviving a deadly crash that should have killed you the next." Kimberly is questioned by Thomas. She says she had a vision and mentions Flight 180, which happened a year ago to the day. It was just like that. Thomas looks startled. Now it's time for that one a-hole named Eugene in this movie to stand up and tell them all about the legend of the teenagers who were unable to cheat death, laughing derisively when he finishes the tale because as far as he's concerned, it's absurd. The cop mentions that survivor Clear Rivers is the only one still alive, but she's locked away in an institution for her own safety. Kimberly can't let go of the fact that they all should have died in that pileup. Rory compares their situation to the different strokes curse. I've never heard of that one. I've heard of the poltergeist curse. You learn something new every day. Survivor Nora thinks they're crazy and wants to get going. Kimberly's father arrives at the station and he and Kimberly embrace as the others are dismissed. By the way, it occurred to me that Thomas looks a little like Tobey Maguire. A.J. Cook as Kimberly looks a little like the actress Kimberly Williams Paisley. It might just be the hair, I'm not sure. Anyway, the first to go is Evan, the lottery winner. His kitchen catches on fire while he's cooking. He escapes despite a malicious universe throwing obstacles in his way left and right, only to be killed by the fire escape ladder falling on him. I do think it's weird that he was cooking leftovers since he just won the lottery. Even if he hasn't gotten a check yet, I would think he could afford fresh takeout. Guess he learned his lesson. Thomas the cop is looking up survivors of the Flight 180 crash, just to torture himself, I suppose. Kat is talking on a headset phone with her mother while on a treadmill and watching the news. They're reporting on the tragedy on Highway 23. The other survivors are watching too. One of the news reports that night is on the death of Evan. I'm surprised it made the news that quickly. The other survivors are like, oh fudgesicle. Tim is in bed reading Stephen King when his mother knocks. His normal reading material, or have recent events inspired him to embrace the dark side? Nora gives him what I assume is a sleeping pill and reminds him of his dentist appointment the next day. Kimberly is trying to sleep. For some unknown reason, she has a creepy clown figurine swinging from the ceiling of her room. Such a weird object that does not go along with the rest of the decor. Kimberly does some research on Clear Rivers on her computer late at night. Can't sleep, might as well terrify herself some more. She gets directions to the institution where Clear is housed. Once at the institution, Kimberly has to forfeit any potentially dangerous objects. I'm actually surprised a padded cell makes a difference. If nothing else, couldn't Clear spontaneously combust? After entering the room, the door closes behind Kimberly all on its own. Creepy. This room is definitely capable of killing Clear. It just doesn't want to for some reason. Kimberly tells Clear her story. Way to go, Clear says. Now you have death or this padded room to look forward to. Expert Clear informs Kimberly that they will die in the same order they were meant to die if her premonition hadn't intervened. Kimberly is worried she's next because she should have died with her friends, but Clear points out that Evan died before her. Kimberly remembers that the officer pulled her out of the way before the crash that killed her friends, so that means she's last on the list. But she says her friends died last in her vision, so why, in this alternate universe, were they killed first? This is confusing. Is death moving backwards? Clear says to watch out for signs. Other than that, she doesn't care what happens to them. All her own friends are dead. So are Kimberly's, but you don't see her crawling into a hole to die. She returns home and runs into the cop Thomas, who is peeping through her windows. He tells her they're having a meeting at his apartment later. He tells her that he believes her because he saw for himself what happened with the last group of kids when he went to take care of Billy's body on the train tracks the year before. She doesn't know what he means when he said he had to clean up Billy. Poor girl has no clue what she's in for. Suddenly a bunch of pigeons come at her and then disappear. The cop didn't see them. She knows it's a sign. She knows Nora and Tim are next due to the order being in reverse, and she thinks maybe they'll be killed by pigeons. The cop is totally confused. Meanwhile, Clear is starting to have second thoughts. Tim is at the dentist. Water from the aquarium is leaking onto an electrical cord, pooling on the floor. A pigeon flies into the dentist's window, and it sounds like this is a common occurrence for him. How many cursed patients does he deal with on a daily basis? Kimberly tracks down Tim and his mom. Not sure how she knew they were at the dentist, but okay. A pigeon crashes through the window in the waiting room and causes chaos. Tim is temporarily left alone by the dentist and almost dies right then and there due to a series of bizarre freak occurrences, but he somehow survives, only to be crushed by a falling object as he's walking with his mother on the sidewalk after his appointment. Kimberly and the cop just happen to show up right before the accident occurs. Nora is devastated and doesn't want to leave the side of what I want to call her son's body, but is basically just his DNA at this point. The cop tells it to Kimberly straight. Why would she even care if she's next? Clear shows up at her house as Kimberly and the cop sit parked in the driveway. Not sure how she tracked her or what resources she had at her fingertips in a padded room in 2003. She takes them to some mysterious dungeon where Bloodworth, played by Candyman actor Tony Todd, is about to incinerate Evan's remains, so I guess it's just a crematorium. Clear wants his help in stopping death. Impossible, he says, but she calls his bluff. She says she and Alex cheated death multiple times, so it must be possible. He says only new life can cause a reboot to Death's plan, and then he disappears from the movie, never to return again. Clear, Kimberly, and Thomas are at the gas station now. They must have teleported there because the cop is saying the kinds of things I would have expected him to talk about on the drive to the gas station, but apparently it was a silent ride, while he considered the best way to express the fact that this guy Bloodworth is one clown short of a circus. Kimberly is overcome by a vision of a white van going into the water. She said it was just like she was there, actually feeling herself drown. The cop remembers there was a pregnant woman in a white delivery van who was at the on-ramp but didn't come to the station with the other survivors. How the heck did she fall through the cracks? Weird that he remembered that little detail about the vehicle she was driving. Even I didn't remember, and it was only a half an hour ago for me. And I've seen this movie multiple times. They look at security footage of the vehicles on the on-ramp, and they spot her van. He says they'll put out an APB. At the meeting at the cop's apartment, Nora says she's probably next. Kat says the timing of this sucks. She's doing well in her career and in her love life. Kimberly hands out mobile phones to the other survivors like they're pieces of Halloween candy. She tells them she will call them if she has any weird visions. She's already a pro at this. Eugene says it's BS. Then he drops his keys and what looks like a random pool ball that rolls into a mousetrap, gets catapulted into the air, and interferes with some pulley system that leads to a kayak swinging down and through the window. Isabella gets stopped by cops while in her van due to the APB. The vehicle had been reported stolen. Kat is helping to safe-proof the cop's apartment but gives up. She says Nora will die first, so she's not worried about taking a little smoke break. Kimberly checks on Nora, who's basically looking forward to joining her husband and son on the other side any day now. Why is death so freaking slow, by the way? It could have taken care of business within a few minutes if it really wanted to, but here it goes, taking its sweet time. Eugene says only he's in control of his destiny. Claire says that would make a very good epitaph. Eugene leaves the apartment, opening the door to a brick wall. What kind of dump does this cop live in? Or is it a metaphor? They're all basically talking to a brick wall when it comes to Eugene. Anyway, without spoiling too much, I will say that Nora is next. She dies in the elevator in a death scene that is reminiscent of one in the 1996 classic Scream. Eugene, Kat, and Claire witness the whole thing. Eugene is really shaken up now. He tries to off himself, but his several successive attempts fail. So much for being the one in control. Now the group is in Kat's vehicle while she's driving. Isabella is in a jail cell and her water breaks. Back in the car, Eugene says he's cheated death before when he was transferred to another school and the teacher who replaced him was killed by a student. The teacher he replaced turned out to be one of the survivors of Flight 180. They all start to realize that each one of them has cheated death once before and that it was a result of a ripple effect caused by the survivors getting off the doomed Flight 180. We learn that Kimberly's mother was shot during an attempted carjacking in a mall parking lot the year before while Kimberly was sidetracked by a news report about the death of a Flight 180 survivor. If she had not been watching that news report, she might have been the one killed. Hearing Kimberly's story, I am reminded of a true case I read about years ago involving one of the victims of the shooting in Aurora, Colorado. What's crazy is that this woman, Jessica Gowie, aka Jessica Redfield, left a mall in Canada right before a shooting in June 2012. She wrote on a blog that she'd had a funny feeling and left, and if she hadn't, she would have been right there when the shooting occurred. She also mentioned that someone was outside the Eaton Center, dressed as Batman, making jokes about how his parents were dead, and how she thought that was so gross to be making jokes after a shooting. About a month later, she was killed at a showing of The Dark Knight Rises. I always thought that was eerily like a Final Destination movie. A girl survives a shooting because of a funny feeling she had, only to die the next month in another shooting in a different country. If it had happened years later, maybe it would have been a coincidence, but because it happened a month later, I don't want to say it was the universe coming back for her. That sounds so callous. I have no evidence that that's accurate, and it doesn't even make sense to me. I don't think that's the way the world works. But it does seem strange. And the fact that there was someone dressed as Batman outside of the Eaton Center the month before in Canada, and especially the fact that she thought to write a post on Twitter about it, makes me think that she got some kind of sixth sense that Batman was going to be important, kind of like a sign or a clue, but she didn't understand it at the time. I don't know. I mean, it's just completely chilling, but I don't think that there is such a thing as death coming back for survivors of a tragedy. That's just ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. But it does make me think that we will never understand all of the little things that happen in this universe, that it's just beyond our comprehension. So back to the movie. The survivors in the car have figured out the reason why they are being targeted and why death is moving backwards. All of them were supposed to have died the previous year, so now death is coming back for them. But this makes no sense because, by its own logic, everything causes a ripple effect. So death would constantly, be having to work backwards to iron out all the wrinkles. And it might as well just start over from scratch and give up. Anyway, speak of the devil, they get into a car accident and go off the road, into a field, through a fence, onto someone's property, where the vehicle is finally stopped by a stack of pipes, one of which goes through the back windshield. So I don't want to spoil too much about the scene, but I will say this. An ambulance arrives because someone was injured in the crash. And then a media van arrives really quickly. I don't know where they get their information or how they get it so fast. The media van almost hits a teen boy on the property, but Rory steps in and pushes him out of the way just in time, and this will come back in the end. This is something important to pay attention to. I won't get into too many of the spoiler details, but I will say that 2 more people die in this scene. Kimberly just looks on in horror for a few seconds and then pulls herself together. Another day, another gruesome tragedy. Moving on. They take someone's truck to go find that Isabella lady. Kimberly has a vision while driving to the hospital. She's come to the conclusion that someone named Dr. Kurlarjan is going to cause something bad to happen to Isabella or the baby. Will the baby be born alive? Will it make a difference one way or the other? Will anyone else die before the credits roll? I will leave the rest a mystery. I think I've spoiled enough. To sum up, there are lots of holes in this plot. For example, as I stated earlier, every new action has a ripple effect, and if that alone doesn't cause a reboot to Death's plan, then why would new life make a difference? Also, if Death is really concerned about minimizing the damage to its original plan, why not just find some convoluted way to kill off all of the survivors within the span of a few minutes? Dragging out the inevitable is just going to lead to more ripples. Also, we find out at the end that Death comes back for the boy in the field who was pushed out of the way of the media van by someone who was never supposed to be alive anyway, and if he'd not been alive, then he wouldn't have been in a vehicle that crashed in that field, and then that media van never would have showed up on that family's property, so I'm not understanding how that boy was destined to die. And if Death is so powerful, how does it not know ahead of time that someone scheduled to die will have a vision, or that someone will intervene and save someone just in the nick of time? So yeah, I have some questions. I give this movie 3 stars because it's a guilty pleasure. You just have to suspend your disbelief. If you do that, the plot line is really quite clever. So that's all for today. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for checking out my channel, and please subscribe if you don't want to miss any of my new content.